Hey Grace Church, Pastor Jim with you here today. Let's spend a couple of minutes talking about an important skill that I think you're going to need when we finally get back to okay meeting again, face to face that is. You know, we're heading towards a return and hopefully sometime soon. And hopefully that we'll be meeting on Sunday mornings again real soon here and meeting each other face to face in our community groups. We're not sure when this is going to happen, but when it does, there's going to be kind of a new normal for us, as it's being called, and things might be a little bit different at church. There are likely to be a number of changes that we should be ready for as we walk into church on that first Sunday or that first community group meeting, whenever that might be. I mentioned this a few weeks ago in one of the Q&A sessions that we do before the pastoral address. And I want to return to some of those changes now and dive a little bit deeper, like into how we should navigate this new normal that we're facing. It's important to remember that some of the social interactions and the behaviors outside the church walls often find their way into the church. It's always been that way, and it's going to continue to be that way. So some of the social changes that we see happening in our world today, they're going to become part of our church life pretty soon here. Now, for instance, in this new normal, people will likely keep that physical distancing gap around themselves. We call it social distancing. The traditional handshake as a greeting is probably on the way out. Some people are just not going to be very comfortable with handshaking or hugging any longer. People will most likely be wearing masks. Even after the mandate ends, they'll probably still be wearing them. Don't be surprised if we see people in our church wearing masks and gloves for some time in our services. It could go on for months, weeks, or whatever. It's going to be a new normal for us, and it's just going to have to be okay. There'll be a lot of pressure to stay home when people are feeling sick. In fact, there may be a lot of social pressure to not just stay home, but to self-quarantine with you and your family to make sure the illness doesn't spread. So when you consider some of these changes in our social behaviors that are coming our way, and there might be others to follow too, how are we to prepare ourselves? How do we get our hearts and our minds ready to deal with these changes that are coming? Well, I propose that we need to develop a skill that most people already have to some degree, the skill I'm going to mention, but some of us need it more. I'm going to raise my hand. And I'll put myself at the top of that list of needing more of this particular skill that we have to navigate, that's going to help us navigate in this new normal. But before I mention the skill, I want to draw your attention to Romans chapter 12, verses 9 through 16. So if you get a moment, get your Bible out, take a look at it. If you recall, Paul was writing to believers in the Roman world, a world where they weren't treated very well, quite honestly. Many believers suffered at the hands of the Romans. But here's what Paul says in Romans 12, verses 9 through 16. And listen for his instructions to believers and see if you can pick out the skill that we need to learn in these changing times of ours. This is Romans 12, verses 9 through 16. Love must be sincere. Hate what is evil, cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in brotherly love. Honor one another above yourselves. Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor serving the Lord. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Share with God's people who are in need. Practice hospitality. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice and mourn with those who mourn. Live in harmony with one another. And do not be proud, but be willing to associate with people of low position. Do not be conceited. Okay, did you hear it in there? Be devoted to one another in brotherly love. Honor one another above yourself. Rejoice with those who rejoice and mourn with those who mourn. Paul was encouraging the believers to come alongside others, even if they didn't feel the same way. Try to walk a mile in the other person's shoes, he was encouraging us to do, and encouraging the Roman believers to do at the same time. Sacrifice to better understand other people's feelings and fears. Now listen, folks, this is the skill of empathy. Empathy is the ability to connect with another person's feelings, even if you don't feel the same way. When you have empathy for somebody, you are committed to try and to see a situation the same way that they do, to try to experience some of the same feelings that they're feeling, to rejoice when they're rejoicing, to mourn when they're mourning, even if you don't feel like it. Now, it's important to remember, empathy does not mean that you have to agree with somebody, because you might not. But empathy does force us to come alongside and walk at the other person's pace, judgment-free. So, as we prepare to meet again, face to face with some new social behaviors and expectations, let's develop that soft skill of empathy. And now here's how empathy might look. If you go to someone to shake their hand or give them a hug, be ready for it not to happen. Some people will not feel comfortable doing the handshake thing any longer. Instead, remind yourself that people are very likely trying to protect themselves and their families, and even you, from spreading a virus. Try to walk a mile in their shoes, and don't force something onto them that they don't want. If someone's wearing a face mask, don't judge them. Connect with their feelings of wanting to remain safe. They may be fearful, some too. Connect with that. I'll bet you can start a conversation with somebody. Listen, let's all commit to prayer and ask God to help us. God, help us be devoted to one another in brotherly love. Let's allow God to change us by having us honor one another above ourselves. Not an easy thing to do. Empathy is not an easy skill to learn. Listen, I miss Sunday morning corporate worship just like you. I miss the people in our community group, but we're on God's timeline, and He will bring us back together when He's ready. Remember, God is still on His throne. He's always been there, and He's always going to be. Hope to see you soon.